What is up, NBA fans? Today, we're going to talk about Jimmy Butler trade ideas. We are 1 week into the season now, and Jimmy Butler is still on the Timberwolves. I think that as time goes on, the chances of him getting traded are decreasing, but I still think there is a very good chance he gets traded, if not within the next week or two, then by the trade deadline. So I'm going to talk about 3 trade ideas for Jimmy Butler and talk about why each team would do this and how this would impact the league. The first trade that I have is with the 76ers, and I have the 76ers giving Markelle Fultz and Robert Covington for Jimmy Butler. There would probably be some picks thrown in there as well. As the season goes on, I think the 76ers front office is going to realize how tough it's going to be to win when Simmons and Embiid are not playing well, and I think that the organization is going to be losing faith increasingly as the season goes on in Markelle Fultz. It's only a matter of time before Philly realizes that they need a third star in order to be real contenders, and Fultz just isn't that star if they want to win right now. So there's a couple things that I like about this trade and a couple things I don't like about this trade for the 76ers. Something I don't like is that Jimmy Butler is not a great three-point shooter. For a team that is going to be built around Ben Simmons for years to come, it's going to be tough getting a third star that is another non-shooter. Philly could decide that they don't want to commit long-term to a guard that can't shoot to go next to Simmons in their offense. Now, there's also a couple things that I like about this trade for the 76ers. Losing Covington will hurt on the defensive end, but Jimmy Butler is one of the best perimeter defenders in the league, so they're not going to miss Covington at all at that end of the floor. Another thing that I like is that Jimmy Butler is a good playmaker, and I think that it's been showing that the 76ers need another playmaker besides Ben Simmons. This would especially help Ben Simmons get some more easy buckets that he can't get now because he is the only playmaker on the team and all of his points come with him on the ball when all of the attention of the defense is focused on him. The last thing that I like about Jimmy Butler is that he's a competitor. He's built to be on a winning team and he's built to compete with the best. So all in all, I think that the positives will outweigh the negatives for Philly and they would end up going for this trade. And then on Minnesota's side, this would be one of the best offers that they're receiving because Jimmy Butler's stock is so low right now. They would get a guard that would fit into their future with Markelle Fultz, who still has loads of potential. And then they also get a 3-and-D wing that will fit perfectly next to their young players that are already on the team in Wiggins and Towns. The next trade that I have is with the Portland Trail Blazers, and this will be a trade centered around CJ McCollum for Jimmy Butler. There has been a lot of talk in the past about whether the Trailblazers will split CJ and Dame or not because they're just not getting far enough in the playoffs and their skill sets are just too similar. Most notably, they're both terrible defenders. If Minnesota were to bite on this offer, the Trailblazers would be getting a player that fits very well next to Dame. Jimmy would be a great fit on the offensive end as a secondary scorer and playmaker next to Dame, but more importantly, he will be that lockdown perimeter defender that the Trailblazers have been lacking for the past couple years. On the Minnesota side, CJ McCollum is probably the highest caliber player that the Timberwolves can get in return for Jimmy Butler at this point, so this is going to be a hard trade for them to turn down. CJ would give the Timberwolves another great scorer next to Wiggins and Towns, and CJ is just young enough to be a building block for the Timberwolves, as he just turned 27 a couple months ago. A team with CJ, Wiggins, and Towns is pretty weak defensively, but it's not a bad place to start building your team moving forward. The last team on my list is definitely the most complicated situation, and they definitely have the most angles that they can attack this from. And that team is the Clippers, and I think that they are the least likely team to make a reasonable offer, but it still could happen based on how things turn out. The first trade that I have for the Clippers is a win-now approach, where they would be trading young players to get Jimmy Butler. This would be a package centered around probably Gilgeous-Alexander, and Jerome Robinson might be thrown in there as well. If Minnesota is looking for a return that is more for the future, then Gilgeous-Alexander is probably one of the best players that they can get at this point. This offer would not be that bad for Minnesota because Gilgeous-Alexander fits pretty perfectly with their future plans. The Timberwolves don't have a point guard of the future yet, and Gilgeous-Alexander is a 6'6" point guard with tremendous potential defensively and offensively. I think him being a good defender is huge right now because that is something that the Timberwolves are severely lacking. And then Jerome Robinson also might be an attractive asset since he is a shooting guard, and with Jimmy leaving, the shooting guard would be a position that would have minutes available, and he also could be a piece moving forward. The Clippers also have some vets to offer if the Timberwolves want to stay in the playoff hunt. The Clippers could center a package around Avery Bradley and Lou Williams, which would give the Timberwolves a starting shooting guard who is a solid defender and a great scorer off the bench, which is something that the Timberwolves have been lacking in recent years. The only thing about this trade is that it can't happen for a couple of months because Avery Bradley was just recently re-signed, so they have to wait until he is eligible to be traded, which I believe is sometime in mid-December. So this is more likely to be a trade deadline offer if Jimmy Butler still hasn't been traded by the trade deadline. If Jimmy is still in Minnesota when Bradley becomes eligible to be traded, then that means that his stock has really sunk since the beginning of the season, and they would accept this trade of Bradley and Lou Will in a heartbeat. And at that point, most teams won't even make any sort of offer for Jimmy because he could walk in free agency, and they wouldn't even have a full season to try to convince him to stay. But he did mention that he wants to play for the Clippers, so I don't think the Clippers would hesitate to make a trade if they needed to. So if Jimmy is going to be a free agent and he wants to play for the Clippers, and the Clippers have the cap space to sign him, why would they trade for him? This would be a flexibility move. Based on cap rules, it would be a lot easier to sign another big-time free agent if they traded for Jimmy now. Jimmy's cap hold is going to be less than the money that he's going to be getting from his next deal, and this trade would also get rid of Lou Will's contract, which would maximize their cap space even more for another free agent. The Clippers could also jump on a trade for Jimmy if another team that Jimmy mentioned he would play for tries to trade for him before the deadline. So Jimmy to the Clippers, I think, is pretty unlikely, but if Jimmy and another star start talking about teaming up, I think this is definitely a possibility. And if he isn't traded before the deadline, there is definitely a strong chance that he will sign with the Clippers in the offseason. So now I'm going to briefly talk about the impact of all these trades on the NBA. For the 76ers trade, I think this could really go either way. I could see him figuring out how to play with Simmons and Embiid and the 76ers becoming real contenders, but I could also see Jimmy leaving after a year with the 76ers deciding they don't want to invest long-term into another star that can't shoot. For the Portland trade, I think that this would make Portland a lot better. Their biggest weakness right now is probably that they don't have a great perimeter defender. So not only will Jimmy thrive as a secondary playmaker on the Trailblazers, but he will also fill a glaring hole on the defensive end that is probably the team's biggest weakness overall. And then lastly, the Clippers. If he got traded to the Clippers, then this would probably mean that there is a super team in the works, so this would be huge as well. Like I said before though, this is going to be unlikely, especially because Kyrie decided to re-sign with Boston, so I don't know who Jimmy is going to want to play with if he can't play with Kyrie. That's it for this video. Let me know what all of you think about the Jimmy Butler situation, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.